I received a $3.2 million retirement package after 28 years of loyalty. I rushed home to surprise my wife, the woman I thought was my greatest blessing. But when I walked through my own front door, I heard another man laughing upstairs. That day, I learned something more valuable than money can buy, and something far more expensive than betrayal. Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. I never imagined that the best day of my professional life would become the worst day of my marriage. For 28 years, I gave everything to that company. Birthdays missed, anniversaries shortened, vacations canceled because a client needed me urgently. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself I was building security, stability, a future for my wife, Denise, and for the life we dreamed about when we were young and broke and eating noodles at midnight in our first apartment. The morning it happened, I walked into the executive conference room expecting another quarterly restructuring meeting. Instead, the CEO and HR director were waiting for me with solemn smiles. My first thought was that I was being laid off. I had seen it happen to too many loyal men before me. But then they slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a letter thanking me for 28 years of exceptional dedication and leadership. And beneath it was an early retirement package, $3.2 million. A full payout of bonuses, stock options, and a negotiated severance that I hadn't even known was being discussed. $3.2 million. I read the number 3 times. My hands trembled. I thought about the mortgage we could finally pay off, the vacations Denise always postponed, the kitchen remodel she'd been pinning online for years. I thought about how proud she would be. The CEO shook my hand. "You've earned this," he said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed someone when they told me that. I left the building carrying that envelope like it was made of glass. I didn't call Denise. I didn't text her. I wanted to see her face when I told her. I imagined her tears, her arms around my neck. Maybe even that laugh she used to have when we were younger, the one that filled a room. I stopped by her favorite bakery and bought a small strawberry shortcake. I even picked up flowers, white lilies. She always said they made the house feel peaceful. It was just after 2 in the afternoon when I pulled into the driveway. Her car was there. Good, I thought. She must have taken the day off. I walked in quietly, balancing the cake box and flowers in one hand, my retirement envelope tucked safely under my arm. The house felt still. Not silent, just still in a way I couldn't explain. And then I heard it. Laughter. It wasn't Denise's laugh. It was louder, deeper, a man's voice, coming from upstairs. At first, my mind refused to process it. I stood frozen near the staircase, convincing myself it must be the television. Maybe she was watching one of those daytime talk shows she loved. But then I heard her voice. Low, playful, intimate. The kind of tone she hadn't used with me in years. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Slowly, I set the cake and flowers down on the entry table. I don't remember making the decision to walk up those stairs. My body just moved. Each step felt heavier than the last. The laughter grew clearer. A man said something I couldn't make out, and Denise giggled. Giggled like a teenager. When I reached the top of the stairs, our bedroom door was slightly open. I saw enough. I don't need to describe it in detail. Some images burn themselves into your mind permanently. The bed we bought together, the quilt her mother made, and my wife, my partner of 32 years, entangled with another man. The envelope slipped from under my arm and hit the floor. That sound must have alerted them. Denise turned first. Her eyes widened in a way I had never seen before. Not guilt exactly, not fear, more like calculation. The man scrambled, grabbing his shirt, and when he turned toward me, my breath left my body completely. It was Victor, my financial advisor, my friend of 15 years, the man who had guided our investments, the man I had trusted with every dollar we saved. He had been at our dinner table. He had shaken my hand. He had called me brother. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Denise said my name, not with panic, not with remorse, just inconvenience. Thomas. That was when something inside me cracked, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet fracture like ice splitting under pressure. I didn't yell, I didn't throw a punch, I didn't even cry. I simply looked at them both and said, "How long?" Victor opened his mouth, but Denise cut him off. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the most predictable sentence in the world. "How long?" I asked again. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "A few years," she said finally. "A few years. While I was working late nights, while I was believing we were building something together, while I was trusting Victor to grow our retirement accounts." The retirement account. My stomach dropped. "Victor," I said slowly, "have you been handling all our transfers personally?" He swallowed. "Tom, let's not do this right now." Right now, as if there was a better time to discover your wife and your financial advisor in your bed. I walked past them to the dresser and picked up Denise's phone. She lunged for it, but I stepped back. There were messages, hundreds, maybe thousands, transfers discussed, investments I didn't recognize, accounts opened under variations of my name. A cold understanding began forming. This wasn't just an affair. This was strategy. This was access. This was deception layered carefully over years. I looked at the envelope on the floor by the doorway, the letter still visible. $3.2 million. And for the first time since leaving that office, I didn't feel proud. I felt hunted. Denise followed my gaze and saw the letter. "What's that?" she asked. I bent down, picked it up, and held it against my chest. "It's my retirement," I said quietly. Victor's eyes sharpened. Denise's face changed. "How much?" she asked. There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not even, "This isn't what it looks like." How much? I said, "Enough." And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The betrayal might not have started with love. It might have started with money. I turned and walked out of that bedroom without another word. Behind me, I heard Denise calling my name, Victor saying something about talking this through. But the only sound that truly mattered was the pounding in my chest and the echo of a question I wasn't ready to answer. Had they already taken more than my trust? Had they already taken my future? I drove without knowing where I was going. That envelope sat on the passenger seat like a silent witness, and every time I glanced at it, my chest tightened. $3.2 million, a corporate retirement payout that should have meant freedom. Instead, it felt like bait in a trap I hadn't known I was standing in. I pulled into a quiet park about 15 minutes from the house. It was the same park Denise and I used to walk through on Sunday evenings when we were younger, back when we held hands without thinking about it, back when our biggest argument was over what color to paint the living room. I turned off the engine and just sat there. Shock is a strange thing. You expect screaming, rage, tears, but what I felt was clarity. A cold, steady clarity that made everything sharper. The sound of children playing in the distance, the hum of traffic beyond the trees, the way my wedding ring pressed against my skin like it suddenly didn't belong there. A few years, she had said. A few years of deception. And Victor, I trusted that man with our investments. He knew about every account, every asset, every password recovery question. He helped structure our portfolio after the market dipped 10 years ago. He reassured me during downturns. He congratulated me when stocks performed well. How many of those congratulations were genuine? My phone buzzed. Denise. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then it buzzed again and again. Finally, I answered. "Thomas," she said, her voice softer now, carefully soft. "Please come home so we can talk." "Talk about what?" I asked calmly. There was a pause. "About us." I looked down at my hand gripping the steering wheel. "You've been talking to him for years. What's left to discuss with me?" "It's complicated." No, it wasn't. "What accounts has he opened in my name?" Silence. My heart thudded once, hard. "Denise." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, too quickly. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. I saw the messages." "It's not illegal," she snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, nothing was illegal." That word lodged itself in my chest. Not illegal. So there were transfers. "Send me statements, all of them, every account connected to my Social Security number." "You're overreacting." I closed my eyes. I walked into my bedroom and found my wife with my financial advisor. If I'm calm right now, it's not because I'm overreacting, it's because I'm thinking. She didn't respond. "I'll be home later," I said, and hung up. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove straight to the bank where our primary accounts were held. I requested printed statements going back 5 years. The teller smiled politely, unaware that my entire marriage was unraveling 1 page at a time. I sat in my car and started reading. At first, everything looked normal. Mortgage payments, utilities, insurance. Then I noticed transfers, small at first, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, labeled as investment allocations. Most were routed through Victor's firm. I dug deeper. Some transfers were redirected into accounts I didn't recognize, joint accounts, but not with Denise, with initials. V.R. Victor Reynolds. My vision blurred for a second. I blinked hard and kept reading. There were also credit lines opened in my name, business ventures I had never approved, real estate inquiries in neighboring states. It wasn't just an affair. It was financial betrayal in marriage. They hadn't drained everything, not yet, but they had positioned themselves, prepared pathways. And if I had come home tomorrow instead of today, if I had casually mentioned the $3.2 million over dinner, I felt a chill run through me. They would have known, and they would have moved fast. Sudden wealth gone wrong. That phrase echoed in my head, not because I had read it somewhere, but because I was living it in real time. I started piecing it together. Victor advising aggressive reallocations, Denise suddenly encouraging me to consider diversifying liquidity, conversations about future flexibility. They weren't planning our retirement. They were planning theirs, and I was the funding source. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. "Tom," he said, voice measured, professional. "Let's not blow this out of proportion." I almost admired his composure. "How long have you been redirecting funds?" I asked. "It wasn't redirecting, it was optimizing." "For your benefit?" For everyone's benefit, he replied smoothly. Denise felt neglected. You were always working. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare justify it with my workload. He sighed. I suppose you have 3.2 million coming, don't you? My grip tightened. So Denise had told him. Yes, I said. There was a subtle shift in his tone. Calculation. Then let's be rational. Emotions aside, this can still be structured advantageously. Advantageously. As if my marriage was a merger negotiation. You think this is about structuring? I asked. It's about damage control, he replied. For the first time that day, anger flickered through me, not explosive, but focused, sharp. You've had access to my accounts for 15 years. If I find one illegal transfer, one— There isn't, he cut in. Everything was authorized. By whom? A pause. Denise has power of attorney on certain accounts. My stomach dropped. Power of attorney. I remember signing documents years ago during a refinancing process, trusting her completely, trusting him to explain what I was signing. The psychological thriller marriage I thought existed in television scripts was sitting in my lap, printed in black ink on bank statements. I'd be contacting a forensic accountant, I said calmly. That would be aggressive. So is sleeping with your client's wife. He didn't respond. I ended the call and leaned back in my seat. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dashboard. For 28 years, I believed loyalty guaranteed security. For 32 years, I believed love guaranteed protection. Now I understood something different. Security without vigilance is vulnerability. Love without boundaries is risk. I looked again at the envelope containing my retirement package. $3.2 million. They thought it was an opportunity. They thought it was their reward. But what they didn't know, what neither Denise nor Victor understood, was that I had just stepped into the most powerful position of my life. Not because of the money, but because now I knew. And when a man who has been deceived finally sees clearly, the power shifts. Quietly, completely. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a modest business hotel on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, just a quiet room with beige walls, a desk, and a bed that didn't carry 32 years of shared history. I needed distance. Not from the house, but from the illusion of it. As I sat on the edge of that unfamiliar bed, I loosened my tie and stared at my hands. These hands had built everything we owned. They had signed contracts, fixed broken sinks, held Denise's hand in hospital waiting rooms, clapped when she blew out birthday candles, and apparently signed documents that handed her more control than I ever realized. Power of attorney. The words kept circling in my mind. I pulled out my laptop and began combing through old emails, years of correspondence with Victor, investment summaries, market analysis reports, tax planning documents. Everything looked professional, clean, logical. That's how deception survives, wrapped in legitimacy. At around 9 that evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Denise or Victor. It was my daughter, Claire. My heart softened instantly. Claire was 26 now, living in another state, building her own career. She had Denise's eyes, and, I used to believe, her mother's warmth. "Dad," she said when I answered, "Mom's been calling me nonstop. What's going on?" I closed my eyes. I hadn't planned on involving Claire. I wanted to shield her from this marriage betrayal drama, but silence would only let Denise shape the narrative. I came home early today, and I found something I wasn't meant to see. There was a pause. "What do you mean?" I found your mother with Victor. The silence on the other end felt heavier than anything Denise had said. Victor? Uncle Vic? She whispered. I swallowed. Claire had called him that since she was a teenager. He'd been at her graduation party. Yes. Oh my God. I heard her breathing change. Shock, confusion, hurt. How long? She asked. Years. She didn't speak for several seconds. Then quietly, Dad, I'm so sorry. That broke something in me. Not the betrayal, not the financial deception, but my daughter apologizing for something she didn't do. It's not your burden, I said gently. Are you okay? That question, so simple, so sincere. I don't know yet, I admitted. She hesitated. Mom said you're overreacting. I almost smiled at the predictability. I saw bank statements, Claire. Transfers, accounts connected to Victor, business ventures in my name. Her voice sharpened. What? There may have been financial betrayal in marriage, not just infidelity. That's illegal. Not necessarily, I said, but it's unethical and it's calculated. Claire exhaled slowly. What are you going to do? That was the question echoing in my own mind. Confront her? Walk away silently? Or plan something deliberate? I'm not making emotional decisions. That's all I know right now. After we hung up, I sat in silence again. The room felt smaller, not suffocating, but focused, like a chamber where decisions are forged. I thought back to the early years with Denise. We met at a company picnic. She wore a yellow dress and laughed at my awkward joke about burnt hot dogs. We built our life carefully. First apartment, first house, Claire's birth. There were no warning signs back then. Or maybe there were, and I dismissed them because I believed marriage trust broken was something that happened to other people. Denise had changed gradually, more distant, more critical of my work hours. She'd say, "You love that company more than you love me." I thought it was insecurity. I tried to compensate with gifts, vacations, reassurance. What I didn't realize was that while I was defending my loyalty, she was redirecting it elsewhere. Around midnight, I received an email notification from Victor. Subject line, clarification. I opened it carefully. It was a polished message explaining that certain joint ventures had been structured for tax efficiency, that Denise, as my spouse, had legal authority to initiate investment movements, that all actions were within permissible financial frameworks. It read like a legal shield. But buried in the attachments were spreadsheets. I downloaded them. There it was. A separate LLC formed 3 years ago. Registered agents, Denise Harper and Victor Reynolds. Initial capital injection, $240,000. Subsequent injections totaling over $800,000. My money, redirected gradually, quietly. And then it hit me. They didn't expect me to retire early. They expected the steady income to continue, which meant the $3.2 million had disrupted their timeline. This wasn't just sudden wealth gone wrong, it was sudden exposure. If I had walked in tomorrow, smiling, announcing the payout, they would have accelerated everything, shifted funds, moved assets offshore perhaps, positioned themselves legally before I even realized what was happening. But I walked in today, before they were ready. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the parking lights flickering against the dark pavement. For years, I believed power in a marriage meant providing, sacrificing, enduring. Now I understood something else. Power is information, and I finally had it. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to listen, observe, document, and then decide whether this would become an emotional revenge story or a redemption story for myself. because revenge feels powerful in the moment, but justice, real justice, requires patience, and patience was something I had mastered over 28 years of corporate survival. The question wasn't whether I could hurt them. The question was whether I could rise above them. I turned off the hotel lamp and lay back on the unfamiliar pillow, staring into the darkness. Tomorrow, I would call an attorney, not to threaten, not to accuse, but to understand exactly how deep this deception went and how cleanly I could step out of it without losing more than I already had. I barely slept that night, not because of anger, not even because of heartbreak. It was the weight of realization pressing down on me. When betrayal stretches over years, you start questioning every memory, every smile, every I love you. You begin to wonder which moments were real and which were rehearsed. At 7 the next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a forensic accountant recommended by a former colleague. The second was to a divorce attorney whose name I had once heard mentioned in a corporate dispute case. I never thought I would need either. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from the attorney, a composed woman in her early 50s named Margaret Ellis. Her office was understated, neutral walls, clean desk, no nonsense. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything: the affair, the hidden LLC, the power of attorney, the $3.2 million retirement package. When I finished, she folded her hands. First, she said calmly, do not confront them about the full extent of what you know. I nodded. Second, freeze any accounts solely in your name immediately. Third, revoke power of attorney today. There was no drama in her tone, just strategy. And the retirement payout, she asked. It hasn't been deposited yet, I said. It's scheduled to clear in 3 business days. She leaned back slightly. Then you have leverage. If you structure this correctly, that money never becomes accessible to her. The word leverage felt strange in the context of marriage, but she was right. Was what they did illegal? I asked. Possibly, she replied, but even if it wasn't criminal, it's actionable in divorce court, especially if funds were diverted for an extramarital relationship. She paused. Let me ask you something, Mr. Harper. What do you want? I looked down at my hands. I wanted the last 32 years back. I wanted the version of Denise who laughed at Bert hot dog jokes. I wanted to unsee my best friend in my bed, but none of those were options. I want fairness, I said quietly, and I want control over my future. She nodded. Then we proceed methodically. From her office, I contacted the bank and revoked Denise's power of attorney. I initiated freezes on any accounts that required dual authorization. Margaret's assistant began filing preliminary separation paperwork, quietly, without serving it yet. This wasn't revenge. This was containment. Around noon, my phone lit up again. Denise. I stepped outside before answering. Thomas, where are you? She demanded. The softness from yesterday was gone. Handling things. You froze the joint account. Yes. You had no right. I had every right, I said calmly. You exercised yours for years. She was silent for a moment. Victor says you're overcomplicating this. I almost smiled at that. Of course he did. Victor no longer advises me. You can't just cut him off. There are contracts. Then he can discuss them with my attorney. The word attorney landed heavily between us. You hired a lawyer? Yes. Her breathing shifted. Fear this time. Thomas, we don't need lawyers. We can work this out privately. Privately. Like the LLC, like the transfers, like the affair. I'm not angry, Denise, I said quietly. I'm aware. That seemed to unsettle her more than shouting would have. You're going to ruin everything. I looked up at the gray morning sky. No, I replied. That happened before I walked through the door. I ended the call before she could respond. Later that afternoon, the forensic accountant called. He had begun reviewing the documents I'd forwarded. There's a pattern, he said. Funds were layered through intermediary accounts before entering the LLC. That's deliberate obfuscation. Is it criminal? I asked. Hard to say yet, but it's coordinated. Coordinated. The hidden affair reveal was no longer just emotional, it was operational. That evening, I returned home for the first time since walking out. The niece was in the kitchen when I entered. She looked tired, pale. For a brief second, I felt the flicker of the old instinct to comfort her. Then I remembered the spreadsheets. "Where have you been?" she asked, getting clarity. She crossed her arms, defensive. "You're acting like you stole from me." I held her gaze. "Didn't you?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. "You formed a company with him," I continued evenly. "You redirected nearly $1 million over 3 years. It was an investment. For whom? For us." I shook my head slowly. "You don't build us in secret." She composure cracked slightly. "You were never here, Thomas. You were married to that corporation." "And so you married my advisor?" I asked softly. Tears welled in her eyes, real tears, but I couldn't tell if they were for me or for the plan unraveling. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she whispered. That sentence echoed in my mind. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," just regret about timing. I stepped back. "The retirement payout clears in 3 days. It will not enter any joint account." Her eyes flickered. "You can't just cut me out." "I can," I said gently, "and I will." Silence filled the kitchen. For the first time in decades, I saw her not as my wife, but as someone standing across from me in negotiation. Power shift. That's what this was. Not loud, not explosive, just decisive. "I gave you everything," she said finally. I know. And that was the truth. I had given her everything, trust, access, loyalty, and now I was taking back the only thing I had left to protect, my future. As I locked upstairs to pack a suitcase, I paused at the bedroom door. The bed was made, fresh sheets, as if that could erase the imprint of what happened there. I didn't step inside. Some rooms you leave behind forever. That night, back at the hotel, I looked at the envelope again. $3.2 million. They thought it was their escape plan. But what they didn't understand was this. Money magnifies character. And when deception meets exposure, justice begins quietly. I wasn't done. Not even close. The morning the $3.2 million cleared, I didn't feel excitement. I felt focus. Margaret had instructed me to open a brand new account at a separate financial institution, one Denise had never used, one Victor had never advised on. The funds were wired directly there, solely in my name, no secondary access, no lingering permissions, clean. When the confirmation notification appeared on my phone, I stared at the number for a long time. $3,200,000. For 28 years, I had believed financial security was the reward for loyalty. Now I understood it was something else entirely. It was protection. And for the first time in days, I felt something close to stability. That afternoon, Denise showed up at the hotel. I hadn't told her where I was staying, but she knew me well enough to guess the type of place I'd choose. Quiet, practical, forgettable. When I opened the door, she looked smaller somehow, not physically, emotionally. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around the modest room. "You're really doing this," she said. I already did. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly together. "Victor says you're making this worse than it has to be." I leaned against the desk, arms folded loosely. "Victor forfeited the right to advise me." She inhaled sharply. You don't understand how it happened. Then explain it. There it was, the opportunity, the truth if she was willing to offer it. She looked down at her hands. You were never home, she began. Even when you were home, you weren't present. You were always thinking about the next meeting, the next deadline. That justifies siphoning nearly $1 million? Her jaw tightened. It wasn't siphoning. It was secret. Silence. Her voice softened. Victor listened to me. And what did I do? You provided, she whispered. You solved problems, but you didn't see me. That sentence stung more than the spreadsheets, because part of it was true. I had worked late, missed dinners, postponed vacations, but I never stopped loving her. And instead of telling me you felt invisible, I said quietly, you built a life with another man. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I didn't mean for it to go that far, but it did. The room felt heavy. Did you plan to leave me? I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. When? I pressed. After your retirement, she admitted softly. There it was. The retirement surprise twist I thought would bring celebration had been part of their timeline. You were going to wait until I stopped working, until the steady income ended, until the accounts were positioned. She didn't deny it. It wasn't about stealing from you. It was about securing something for myself. Using my name, I replied. Her silence was confirmation. For years, we believed we were building one future. In reality, she was constructing an exit strategy. Did you ever love me? I asked, not accusing, just seeking clarity. She looked up at me, eyes red. Yes, I did. I do. But not enough to protect me. She didn't answer. That was when I felt something shift completely inside me. Not anger, acceptance. I filed preliminary separation paperwork, I said evenly. Her face drained of color. You what? It hasn't been served yet, but it will be. She stood abruptly. Thomas, please, 32 years. I know exactly how many years, I said gently. She stepped closer. We can fix this. Counseling, mediation, whatever you want. I studied her face carefully. Was this remorse or fear of losing financial stability? Why now? I asked. Why not before I walked in? She had no answer, and that silence was the loudest truth in the room. After she left, I sat alone for a long time. This wasn't the explosive, emotional revenge story some might expect. There were no shattered dishes, no screaming matches, just the quiet unraveling of trust. The forensic accountant called later that evening with an update. The LLC they formed is underperforming. It's leveraged heavily. If you pursue divorce citing financial misconduct, you could argue dissipation of marital assets. In simpler terms, they mismanaged what they took. A small, bitter irony. Document everything, I told him. When the call ended, I looked again at the bank confirmation on my phone. $3.2 million. I thought about revenge. The temptation was there. I could file suit against Victor's firm, public exposure, professional ruin, but something deeper stirred in me. Revenge ties you to the person who hurt you. Freedom releases you. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop and began listing everything I still had. My health, my daughter's love, my professional reputation, my integrity. They had taken trust, but they hadn't taken who I was. And suddenly I saw another path, not just separation, transformation. What if the money wasn't a weapon? What if it was a reset? I began researching charitable foundations, educational grants, veteran housing. For the first time since that afternoon upstairs, I felt something unexpected, peace. Because if Denise and Victor believed the $3.2 million was their future, they were about to discover that the future no longer included them, not in the way they imagined. And the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's detachment. I closed the laptop and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, the paperwork would move forward, and so would I. The paperwork was served on a Tuesday morning. I didn't deliver it myself. Margaret handled everything with quiet efficiency. Denise called within an hour, her voice shaking, not with sorrow this time, but with the unmistakable tremor of consequences becoming real. "You're divorcing me?" she said, as if the word itself had just been invented. "I'm separating legally," I replied. "Divorce is the next step." "You're throwing away 32 years. I closed my eyes briefly. "No, Denise, I'm acknowledging what's already been thrown." She tried another angle. "Victor says you're overplaying your hand. If you drag this into court, everything comes out." "That's the idea." Silence. Because public exposure wasn't just uncomfortable for her, it was catastrophic for him. A financial advisor involved in a hidden affair reveal with a client's spouse, a layered LLC funded through redirected client assets. Even if technically structured within gray areas, the optics alone could dismantle his career. "You'd ruin him," she whispered. "I didn't create his choices," I said calmly. There it was again, the shift. For years, I carried responsibility for everything: bills, repairs, emotional stability, even her loneliness, apparently. Now I was returning responsibility to its rightful owners. Margaret later explained our position clearly. Because of documented financial misconduct and dissipation of marital assets, I had strong leverage. The nearly $1 million moved into the LLC could be accounted for in settlement negotiations. The affair compounded the case. But then she asked me something unexpected. "Do you want to pursue maximum financial damage or clean separation?" she asked. I thought about that long and hard. Maximum damage would mean audits, depositions, subpoenas. It would mean dragging every secret into the light. It would mean Victor's reputation in tatters, Denise's image fractured in front of friends and family. Clean separation would mean reclaiming my share, protecting the retirement payout, and walking away without theatrics. The emotional revenge story inside me wanted exposure, but the man I was becoming wanted peace. "Clean," I said finally, but firm. She nodded. "Then we negotiate strength without spectacle." That afternoon, I met Claire for coffee halfway between our cities. When she walked in, she hugged me tightly, longer than usual. "I can't believe this," she said softly. "Neither can I." She pulled back and studied my face. "You look different." "How?" "Calmer, but heavier." That was accurate. I told her about the legal steps, about the $3.2 million being secured, about the potential settlement. She listened quietly. "Mom called me crying. She says you're punishing her." I took a slow sip of coffee. Accountability feels like punishment when you're not used to it. Claire stared down at the table. "Did you ever think about forgiving her?" I considered that carefully. "Forgiveness," I said slowly, "is different from reconciliation." She nodded. "I don't hate your mother. Hate would mean she still controls how I feel. I'm choosing something else." "What?" "Detachment." Claire's eyes softened. "I'm proud of you." That meant more to me than she probably realized. On my way back to the hotel, I stopped by the house one final time while Denise was out. I walked through each room slowly: the kitchen where we hosted Thanksgiving dinners, the living room where we argued over paint colors, Claire's old bedroom, still holding faint traces of childhood. I wasn't angry. I was saying goodbye. Upstairs, I paused outside the master bedroom again. The door stood open. I stepped inside this time. The bed was neatly made. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. It looked ordinary. That's the cruel part of betrayal. The setting remains the same, only the meaning changes. I opened the closet and removed the last of my belongings: suits, shoes, a framed photo from our 20th anniversary trip. I studied the picture for a moment. We were smiling, and maybe at that time it was real. Not everything had been a lie. That realization mattered, because if I turned our entire history into fiction, then I would lose more than she did. As I walked out of the house, I placed the key on the kitchen counter. No note, no final speech, just closure. Later that evening, Margaret called with news. Victor's firm has requested a private settlement discussion, she said. Of course they had. Public scrutiny was their greatest fear. They're offering to dissolve the LLC and return capital contributions in exchange for non-disclosure. I let that settle in. They were scared. Full restitution plus documented admission of mismanagement. Sealed. That's strong, she replied. So am I. After the call ended, I opened my laptop again and returned to the list I had started days earlier. What if the money wasn't just protection? What if it was purpose? I began drafting a plan. $1 million set aside for secure long-term living, another portion invested conservatively under independent management, and a significant portion allocated differently. I researched scholarship foundations for first-generation college students, housing programs for displaced veterans, community grants. For years, I believed wealth measured success. Now I saw something else. Impact measured freedom. If Denise and Victor built their secret future from deception, I would build mine from intention. And in doing so, I would transform what began as a sudden wealth gone wrong into something meaningful. Not for revenge, but for redemption. As the night settled in, I realized something profound. The greatest power shift wasn't financial, it was emotional. They expected rage, they prepared for confrontation. What they didn't anticipate was composure, and composure is terrifying to those who built plans around your chaos. I leaned back in the chair and allowed myself, for the first time since that afternoon upstairs, a small breath of relief. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost an illusion. And sometimes that's the beginning of clarity. The following week moved in a strange rhythm. Each morning, I reviewed statements with the forensic accountant. Each afternoon, Margaret negotiated quietly with Denise and Victor's attorney. Every evening, I returned to my hotel room, ate simple meals, and planned the next phase of my life. For the first time in decades, I wasn't running from anything. I was steering. Denise's calls slowed over time. At first, they were frantic, emotional, pleading, then cautious, strategic. Finally, they stopped entirely. Victor tried once with an email that read like a corporate proposal, but I forwarded it immediately to Margaret. That was the beauty of detachment, the ability to respond without fury, without impulsive judgment, without letting them know the depth of my awareness. Claire visited midweek. She came with coffee in hand, smiling despite the tension. "You're handling this better than I expected," she said softly. "I'm not handling it, I'm observing it. There's a difference." Her gaze lingered. "You look free." Free. I hadn't considered that word. The word hovered like a light in a dark room. For 32 years, my life had been structured around obligation to the company, to my family, to a sense of duty. Betrayal had broken the framework, but in doing so, it revealed the architecture beneath, and beneath it, I saw possibility. That evening, I met Margaret to finalize the legal settlement. Denise would return every dollar misappropriated into the LLC. Victor's firm would dissolve their joint venture entirely. Neither could access any part of my retirement payout. Non-disclosure agreements were signed, confidentiality assured. I left Margaret's office with a sense of completion I had not expected. There was no celebration, no fireworks, no vindictive gloating, just a quiet, almost reverent satisfaction. Back at the hotel, I stared at the envelope that had started this entire chain of events. $3.2 million. I remembered the shock of seeing that number for the first time, the elation I felt imagining Denise's reaction. I remembered the laughter upstairs, the sudden collapse of everything I thought I knew. And now I saw it differently. The money had been a catalyst, not a reward. It had forced clarity. It had revealed character. It had offered me a choice, revenge or reinvention. I made the decision while sitting at the desk, the city lights flickering outside the window. I would not hoard it. I would not indulge in petty revenge. I would redirect it. A portion for my own security, yes, but the majority would go into causes that mattered: education, community programs, initiatives that helped people I would never meet, but whose lives I could impact profoundly. This was the quiet justice I wanted, to transform the tool of betrayal into a legacy of purpose. I began contacting charitable organizations, arranging donations, setting up trusts, and ensuring that every step was transparent and legally sound. The process was meticulous. Some nights exhaustion threatened to overtake me, but I pushed through. Each spreadsheet, each legal form, each careful transfer became a small act of reclamation. With each action, the weight of betrayal lightened slightly. One night, as I finalized the paperwork for a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, Claire sat beside me, watching. "She's going to be shocked," she said quietly, a mix of awe and disbelief in her voice. "I might be," I admitted, "but it's not about shocking her, it's about freeing me." She nodded. "I never realized how much you sacrificed all these years." I smiled faintly. I did what I thought was right, and now I'm doing what I know is right. By the end of the week, most of the major transfers were complete. I had a modest portion of funds set aside for myself, carefully managed, unlinked to any of the previous accounts. Another portion was invested for long-term stability. The remaining bulk had been directed into foundations and programs that would make tangible differences in people's lives. I realized something unexpected in the process. It wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming narrative. For decades, I had been a character in someone else's story: corporate obligations, family expectations, Denise's emotional needs. Now, I was the author. Every decision, every transfer, every plan was mine. I was no longer reacting to betrayal, I was creating purpose from it. And in that, I found a quiet joy, not fleeting, not euphoric, but steady, warm, grounding. I began journaling again, something I had abandoned years ago. I wrote about the shock of the discovery, the weight of deception, the cold realization that trust had been manipulated. But I also wrote about strategy, about the calm satisfaction of taking measured steps, about the beauty of transforming pain into something meaningful. Each entry became a meditation, a guidepost toward emotional closure. One evening, I took a walk through the same park where I had sat the first night after discovering the affair. The autumn leaves crunched underfoot. The air was crisp, clear. I watched parents push strollers, children chase each other, elderly couples sit quietly on benches. Life moved on, indifferent to my pain and triumph alike. And for the first time, I felt in sync with that movement. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter, I wasn't lost. I was present, fully aware of the choices I had made, the lessons I had learned, and the future I was now free to create. The betrayal left scars, yes, emotional echoes that would resurface unexpectedly, a glance at a bank statement, a memory triggered by a song or smell. But the scars were mine now, not theirs. They were evidence of survival, of resilience, of clarity. And in that realization, I understood the moral of the story I had lived through. Loyalty is a gift, trust is a bridge, but both must be guarded with awareness. Wealth, sudden or earned, is not just currency, it is influence. And influence, when wielded consciously, can reclaim what deception attempts to steal. By the time the weekend arrived, most of the legal matters were settled quietly. Denise had left the house, Victor had resigned from the firm under pressure from compliance investigations, quietly with no public spectacle. Claire stayed with me for a short visit, and we spent time planning her next career steps, laughing over old memories, and imagining futures untainted by past betrayals. That Sunday evening, I returned to my hotel room one final time before moving into a new home I had purchased quietly months prior. I opened the envelope that had started this entire chain of events, now emptied of statements but symbolically preserved. I held it in my hands and smiled softly. Not for the money it represented, not for the power it had given me, but for the journey it had catalyzed. And in that quiet moment, I realized that the real value of what I had received wasn't financial. It was the awakening it forced, the recognition that integrity, patience, and careful strategy could transform betrayal into clarity, revenge into purpose, and devastation into a legacy of meaning. I folded the envelope carefully and placed it in a drawer. The past was preserved, but I was no longer trapped by it. The house, the bank statements, the deception, all of it belonged to history now, and my future belonged to me. Moving into the new house felt like stepping into a life that had always been waiting for me. It wasn't extravagant. The walls weren't adorned with gold frames or luxury finishes. It was practical, comfortable, and entirely mine. Everything in it reflected my choices, my taste, my independence. For the first time in decades, I could decide everything, from the color of the curtains to the placement of the furniture, without compromise or hidden agendas. Unpacking the last of my belongings from the hotel, I came across the framed photo of Denise and me from our 20th anniversary trip. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the tug of nostalgia, but instead of packing it away to preserve the memory, I set it on the bookshelf where it could be seen, yet separated from the rest of my life. I wasn't erasing history, I was acknowledging it and taking control of how it would live in my present. Claire visited again that weekend. We spent hours walking through the neighborhood, exploring local coffee shops, and planning her next moves in the city. For the first time, I didn't feel like a man weighed down by betrayal or financial deception. I was simply a father enjoying the company of his daughter, watching her thrive and feeling connected in ways I hadn't in years. We sat on the porch swing as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky was a mix of amber and violet. Claire turned to me, curiosity and concern in her eyes. "Dad, are you okay? Truly." I smiled faintly. "I'm more than okay. I'm free." She frowned slightly. "Free? How? After everything?" Because freedom isn't the absence of pain, it's the ability to move forward in spite of it. I can't change the past, Claire, but I can decide how the future looks. And right now, the future looks like me reclaiming it on my own terms. She nodded thoughtfully. "You've changed," she said softly. "You're stronger, calmer, more certain." I hadn't realized how much her observation would resonate. I looked out over the quiet street, the sound of distant traffic and children playing faintly in the background. I've learned that patience is more powerful than rage, and that composure can accomplish what anger never can. The moment I lost illusion, I gained control. Later that evening, I began reviewing the donations and investments I had arranged from the retirement payout. I had set up scholarships for students who were first in their families to attend college, supported housing initiatives for veterans, and contributed to programs that helped communities rebuild after natural disasters. Each action felt deliberate, restorative, meaningful. Every transfer, every legal filing, every note sent to a foundation carried weight far beyond what money alone could achieve. It was in that quiet work that I understood something profound. The greatest betrayal I had endured, the laughter upstairs, the hidden accounts, the financial deception, had also revealed the most powerful truth about myself. I could turn devastation into purpose. I could convert betrayal into a chance to leave something lasting and positive in the world. A week later, Margaret called to confirm the final settlement. Denise had returned all misappropriated funds. The LLC was dissolved. Victor's professional reputation had been quietly diminished, though without public exposure thanks to careful legal maneuvering. Everything was finalized. The separation and divorce were official. I hung up the phone and let the silence sink in. My stomach relaxed in a way it hadn't in weeks. The storm had passed, leaving a stillness that was almost tangible. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, quietly, deliberately, intentionally. That evening, I invited Claire to dinner at a small local restaurant. We laughed over memories of old vacations, debated over movies, and planned future adventures. She asked about my work with the charitable foundations, and I told her everything about the scholarships, the housing initiatives, the programs I had supported. She listened with wide eyes, impressed and inspired. "You turned all of that from betrayal?" she asked. "Yes," I said simply, because the alternative, revenge, bitterness, anger, would have trapped me. Using this as purpose freed me. Claire smiled, leaning across the table to squeeze my hand. "I've never been prouder of you." And in that moment, I realized something else. The true value of the $3.2 million wasn't in the wealth itself. It was in the awakening it had forced. It had stripped away illusions, revealed character, and given me the opportunity to define my own path. It had transformed betrayal into clarity, fear into action, and devastation into something profoundly meaningful. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a rhythm. I worked with the foundations, ensuring that my contributions were making tangible impact. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during years consumed by work and loyalty. I began exercising, walking in the park, rediscovering hobbies I had abandoned, and reading, sketching, simple pleasures that reminded me who I was outside of the context of marriage and corporate identity. And yet I never forgot the lessons the betrayal had taught me. Trust must be vigilant, loyalty cannot be blind, and wealth, sudden or earned, is a tool, not a safeguard. Most importantly, the greatest strength comes not from retaliation, but from reclaiming control and purpose. One quiet evening, as I sat in my new living room watching the sunset, Claire beside me with a book in her lap, I reflected on everything. Betrayal, deception, lost trust, it had all been devastating, but it had also been transformative. Without it, I might never have seen the true value of independence, composure, and intention. Without it, I might never have learned how to channel anger into purpose. I've thought about Denise and Victor. They had lost the opportunity to manipulate me, to profit from deception, to shape the narrative of my life. But they hadn't taken the most important thing, my integrity, my perspective, my ability to create impact. That, I realized, could never be stolen. I leaned back, letting the warm light of the setting sun fill the room. For the first time, I allowed myself a sense of completion. Not revenge, not anger, not sadness, only clarity, purpose, and a quiet but resolute freedom. And in that moment, I knew the moral of my story. Life will test loyalty. Wealth will tempt trust. Betrayal may wound deeply, but strength, real enduring strength, comes from reclaiming your life with integrity, turning adversity into opportunity, and using even the darkest moments to build something meaningful, lasting, and true. The final weeks of the process were surprisingly quiet. The divorce was finalized without fanfare. Denise moved out, taking only what belonged to her personally. leaving behind the house, the accounts, and the illusions she had tried to build. Victor quietly resigned from his firm and retreated from public life, the sting of exposure, however discreet, enough to mark the end of his influence over me. I felt no triumph in their absence, only relief. The storm had passed, and the air was finally clear. I returned to my routines, grounded in the new life I had begun to construct. Each morning I walked through the park near my home, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, the laughter of children, and the distant hum of life moving forward. It was ordinary, it was peaceful, and yet it was powerful because I had chosen it, deliberately, free from manipulation or betrayal. The charitable projects became my anchor. I visited a scholarship program for first-generation students, met with a group of veterans about housing opportunities, and even attended a community workshop I had helped fund for people rebuilding their lives after financial hardship. Each time I witnessed transformation, the ripple effect of resources, intention, and care. It was a reminder that the most profound influence often comes not from confrontation, but from action grounded in purpose. One afternoon, Claire and I sat together in the living room reviewing letters from scholarship recipients. "Dad," she said, reading aloud one note, "I never thought I'd get this chance. Thank you for believing in people like me." I smiled quietly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with money. "It's not about us," I said. "It's about giving people the tools to create their own future." She looked at me thoughtfully. "I think you've healed, Dad. I think you're finally free." Perhaps she was right. I had spent weeks untangling myself from deception, financial and emotional. But it wasn't just about reclaiming money or controlling outcomes. It was about reclaiming my mind, my heart, my life, about understanding that betrayal doesn't have to define you, it can refine you. One evening, I took a long walk through the city reflecting on the journey. The betrayal, the hidden accounts, the laughter I shouldn't have heard, all of it had shaped a path I would never have chosen, but one that had revealed truths I needed to see. I had discovered patience, composure, and the power of strategic action. I had discovered the value of detachment without bitterness and strength without malice. Returning home, I opened a new journal I had bought recently. I began writing again, not about Denise, not about Victor, not about betrayal, but about clarity, purpose, and the life I was determined to build. Words poured out, reflections on trust, loyalty, and integrity, lessons learned, decisions made, intentions set. Every page became a testament to resilience, a map of the emotional journey I had endured, and a blueprint for the future I wanted to create. The final act, I realized, was not legal, not financial, not even emotional in the traditional sense. It was internal, a conscious decision to take the pain, the shock, the betrayal, and transmute it into growth. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them to fail. I wanted them gone from my story so I could write the next chapters unencumbered. And then I thought about the envelope, the one that had sat on my passenger seat the day I discovered the laughter upstairs. $3.2 million. The number had once felt like destiny, like freedom, like temptation. Now it felt like a tool I had used not to punish but to build, not to wound but to heal, not to dominate but to empower. Weeks turned into months. I adjusted to the rhythm of independence, the quiet joy of self-directed life. Friends who had drifted returned, curious and cautious at first, then drawn into the calm certainty I now carried. Claire thrived in her work and personal growth, and I found satisfaction in witnessing her confidence blossom. I no longer felt the need to control every outcome. Instead, I guided, advised, and stepped back, letting others succeed while I held firm to my principles. Sometimes at night, I replayed the moment I had walked into my bedroom and heard the laughter upstairs. I recalled the shock, the initial disbelief, the surge of betrayal. But the sting had softened over time, replaced by something more profound: clarity. That day had changed everything, but it hadn't destroyed me. It had forged me. And in that forging, I discovered a truth often overlooked. When the worst happens, the best responses are not always visible. They are the quiet, steady, intentional choices we make afterwards. I no longer feared sudden wealth, betrayal, or deception. I understood them now as tools, challenges, and opportunities. I had witnessed how quickly trust can be broken, how carefully deception can be layered, and how easily a single act of transparency or lack thereof can shift power. But I had also seen how measured action, clarity, and integrity could reclaim not just assets, but life itself. In time, I began sharing my experiences selectively with close friends, mentors, and even through writing, not as a tale of vengeance, but as a story of vigilance, resilience, and intentional living. I wanted others to see that betrayal doesn't have to define you, that wealth doesn't have to corrupt you, and that clarity can transform devastation into opportunity. One quiet Sunday morning, as the sunlight filtered through the curtains of my new home, I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, breathing deeply. Claire had gone off to her job, the neighborhood was alive with soft activity, and the world felt full of possibilities. For the first time in decades, I felt an unbroken sense of peace. I wasn't haunted by the past. I wasn't obsessing over what could have been. I was present, whole, and in control of my own life. I thought about Denise one last time, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with acceptance. She had made her choices. I had made mine. The marriage had ended, yes, but the life I would now lead was mine to craft, and I was determined to do so with purpose, integrity, and clarity. And as I sipped my coffee and watched the morning light spill across the lawn, I understood the final lesson of this journey. Betrayal may break trust, wealth may test character, and deception may wound deeply, but true strength lies in how you respond, in reclaiming control, in building purpose, in transforming pain into something meaningful. That, more than any amount of money, any legal victory, or any revenge, is freedom. I smiled quietly, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by the calm power of intentional living. $3.2 million had given me shock, betrayal, and fear, but it had also given me clarity, purpose, and the courage to begin again. And that, I realized, was the real reward. The story ends not with rage, but with resolution, not with loss, but with renewal. And in that quiet victory, I discovered the ultimate truth. When you survive betrayal with integrity, the life that follows is richer than anything money could buy.